Welcome to Module 3, where we discuss nostalgia. What is nostalgia? What makes you nostalgic? Do you sometimes daydream of things from your childhood? Sometimes a smell can trigger a distant memory. Perhaps it's the smell of a certain musty earth that reminds you of a soccer match. Maybe it's good cooking on an old city back street. Maybe a whiff of that familiar cologne your dad used to wear, or an ex. Sometimes it's an old song from your grade school days. Sometimes it's longing for days you never even experienced. You know, like dreaming of days of the pioneers of flight, or swing dance halls in the 1940s. Maybe you wish you could take in a Jimi Hendrix concert, or even witness the founding of America. And sometimes nostalgia goes even deeper than that. It becomes a sense of longing for home. That sense of not belonging in the time or place you are currently living. For whatever reason, something about your circumstances just feels out of joint. Like you are not in sync with what's going on around you. When this kind of feeling sets in, people tend to get nostalgic for days gone by. For whatever reason, the past seems safer, better, easier to understand. It becomes a haven for the tired, anxious mind. It also becomes a great place to escape. Much of the best fiction is created as an escape into the nostalgic past. Writers of historical fiction often used authentic historical details to create works set in a time and place far removed from the current experience. In the Meiji period, 1868 to 1912, and the Taisho period, 1912 to 1926, authors such as Mori Ogai and Akutagawa Ryunosuke wrote splendid examples of historical fiction. Both authors were well versed in the literature and customs of the past, and both used the past as a stage in which to set improbable characters dealing with complex, modern, ethical, social, and religious questions. Indeed, one of literature's great roles is to construct worlds in which readers may not only abandon their current frustrations, but find answers to life's questions in the process through the author's skillful storytelling. And more often than not, it's not just an enjoyable story that makes a work of fiction worth reading. Skillful authors such as these tend to encode multifarious messages for readers to unpack and learn from. In similar ways, late 20th and early 21st century mangaka and anime directors employ tropes of the past. After seeing and hearing about postmodernism in Japan, you may no doubt have learned that the modern promise of progress and conquest did not necessarily yield materialistic salvation. Again, see Baudrillard and Azuma on this. Purveyors of colonialist ideas equating so-called inferior technology with inferior culture, see Mertz, sought to civilize the undeveloped world. But how? Well, by their means of spreading scientific rationalism and technical development. But how did technological expertise, and consequently high-tech weaponry, truly indicate superior culture? What happened to societies that rapidly industrialized? The rise of individual prowess and consumerism effected the replacement of common communal values and community cohesion. Thus, the individual grounded in social circles and established hierarchies, whether or not these hierarchies were good for everyone is of course a point of contention to be considered carefully, especially in regard to women outcasts and others who were considered to be inferior by their social rank. Well, those who were cut off from this became unmoored. The loss of social ties to one's native place, the ties to historic conceptions of self and other, generated great anxiety. With technology came more time to work on other tasks as well as leisure time. With more time came time to think about oneself, one's feelings, one's purpose in life, in addition to one's duties and one's basic needs. While modernization and technical advancement allowed for greater ease and greater wealth, it also allowed for greater isolation and greater separation from others. Neighbors were simply not needed to the same extent that they were in the past. With electricity and heaters, no one needed charcoal vendors. With garage door openers, no one leaves their house in the morning. They just get in their car and use the automatic garage door opener, and thus the chance to daily greet neighbors vanishes. Harvard-based sociologist Robert Putnam discussed these very issues within modern society in his book Bowling Alone, in which he indicates that membership in American social, civic, and religious organizations has vastly decreased, while younger people tend to dissociate and spend more time in front of screens, alone. Perhaps you have experience with this in your own lives. The video arcade and shopping mall were essential to youth socialization in the 1980s. Trust me, I know. By the 1990s, the arcade began to decline as home entertainment systems became every bit as high quality in graphics and sound, in many ways surpassing the arcade games. Internet shopping made the shopping mall less necessary for FaceTime, while online chatting filled the connection void found at the mall. For many, not everyone, of course. And now, Borders has just gone under, which means anyone who wants to read manga and browse through them in a cafe setting with their friends won't be able to. They'll have one less outlet for that because of places like Amazon.com and Scanlations and other technological increases that allow us to consume things on our own. Because humans are social creatures, the need for socialization does not decrease, but tends to take other forms, online or off. Yet something is still missing for many. Consumerism tends to work only if you have money and something to buy. Governmental national identity works when you are in power and your economy is booming. But what happens when an economic bubble bursts, such as in Japan in the early 1990s and in the USA in the late 2000s? What happens when your military power can no longer keep you 100% safe? In what or who do you trust? For some, these questions lead to nostalgia. As you get older, you may start to say, remember when people used to... ... You see a disconnect between the experience of today and the memory of your own lived experience. And when you construct stories of these lived experiences, fictional or not, you may be creating an idealized world. This is often what nostalgic social movements and nostalgic manga or anime do. They create a world that the anxious mind can escape to and find room in which to breathe. They allow an escape to a kinder, gentler time, even if that time never truly existed as constructed on paper or on screen. And they allow for a shared cultural cohesion to emerge among viewers. So in this module, you will watch Takahata Isao's movie adaptation of the manga Only Yesterday. That is, in Japanese, おもひでぽろぽろ. That means memories flow down like rain. A nostalgic, and to borrow from Susan Napier, elegiac film, it is about a woman in her late 20s who is searching to find her place in the world by following her heart. This nostalgic journey, released in the early 1990s, takes the viewer back to the 1960s, via 1983, when the film was set. In conjunction with the field studies about nostalgia in Japan, and the previous readings on postmodernism and the real and otaku culture, a picture of this kind of idealized world will emerge. How do we create our own idealized worlds? Are idealized worlds something that we use for good or for bad? These are questions you might want to keep at the forefront of your mind when you are watching and viewing these anime.